I mean, I don't think we should have sound yet. I thought I did. I thought I only had sound. Okay, well, then let's start.
You clicked a button.
Click the button. Uh-huh. All right. Hi, everybody. Hello, Internet. Hello, Dark Star Magic. Yeah, there's going to be a delay on the screen, so you won't see what I'm doing for a couple seconds, but hopefully it's working.
We're good. Okay.
And hopefully if there are people watching, they will tell us if things are working or not. But anyhow, welcome. Thank you to Dark Star Magic for hosting us. My name is Eric Arnemancy. This is Eric Purdue.
Two Erics, one
Two Erics, one
shop
podcast. And it's Halloween, and we're going to talk about the only thing people have been letting you talk about for the past 2 years.
Yeah, no one ever wanted to talk about this ever.
Yeah, you've never.
First.
I'm really glad I came across your work. It's really impressive.
Oh, thank you.
Well, let's just go into sort of a brief overview. So 3 books of occult philosophy, written by Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa in the 1500s.
1533.
Well, I mean, that's when it was
Well, that's when it was published.
Yeah. I mean, we could totally nerd out on that in a little bit. But
Sure.
the last full English publication before the last few years was in 1651 by a mysterious human named J.F.
Right.
Do you have an opinion on who that is?
No, there's a James French and John
Freak.
French and a John Freak?
One of them's a freak and one of them's a French.
Yeah, it's a French and a freak.
And nobody can really tell them apart.
James Freak.
John French. So everybody had access to this because it had mostly stayed in print or been redone and republished under other names. And then you did like a full-ass translation that took you... From scratch. That took you 10 years? 15 years?
10 years.
And I mean, that's impressive. It's really impressive when you see how big the book is. It's 3 books.
No false advertising.
Did you know Latin before you started working on this?
Yeah, it was my second project. Big project.
Oh, what was your first one?
Picatrix.
Oh, that's right.
It was never published.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
I finished, I think, the first 3 books.
Yeah.
I was working on the 4th when I realized Warnock and Greer
We're doing theirs.
coming out with theirs, and I was a little shaky about some of the animal and botanical names in there.
All right, well...
So I just I said, I'll let them worry about it.
Let's start there, because book 1 of Agrippa is filled with animal names and plant names. And did you find those easier or more difficult?
It was easier because the majority came from Pliny the Elder. And there was already a good translation of it.
Good.
And,
I mean, it's okay.
good.
Yeah.
It's good. But when I started digging into it, I realized that really no one knows, what a lot of these are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, it's all plants that are 500 years old, so people probably called things by different names a little bit also. And how many of them would be even findable in the United States?
Some of them.
Some of them, yeah. So the thing that I really wanted to talk to you about is that, your translation has made a really big impact. People are actually reading Agrippa now, and that's not something that I think ever really happened before. Or if people...
They owned it.
Everybody had it. The big black doorstop from Llewellyn, or they would have the Magus, or they would have one of the, rip-offs of Agrippa.
Whitehead.
What?
His name is Whitehead.
Who? I don't think I know him.
Yeah, he did book 1. He sort of did what Tyson did, and
Okay.
Modernized the English, and he did his own footnotes, which were kind of theosophical.
Okay. Well, I know about the Magus, and I know about De Laurence doing his weird one.
I forgot about him.
Yeah, so
he did everything.
Yeah. But once you published it, those were just as those previous versions were all just as unreadable as the 1651.
It was the same version.
It was the same version, just kind of repackaged. But now people can actually read it, and they are. And it's kind of interesting to watch folks have reactions to the book and what they think of it and how they're looking at it. People are realizing somehow people are just now realizing that Agrippa didn't have any ritual instructions, or Agrippa didn't have a whole lot of practical stuff in his book.
It's kind of turned a few people off though too.
It has.
Yeah.
And it's baffling to me. I mean, I think before people were just using the old version as an encyclopedia. They would just look up specific pages and be like, here's what's going on. But when you came into the Agrippa project, the translation, were you already a professional astrologer at that point? Or?
Yes, I was just starting.
So,
No, actually, I'll take that back. I'm mixing that up with Picatrix. I just started when I was doing Picatrix, but I had a few years in me before I started doing Agrippa.
And what sort of astrology had you been focusing on?
Traditional, pre-modern.
Okay.
I think by the time I started Agrippa, I'd finished the Robert Zoller course, the middle astrology course.
Okay, so you kind of... So was Agrippa's role in like cataloging astrological stuff like known very much at the time? Like, did people ever reference him or talk about his stuff?
Not the astrology, not as much. I mean, Christopher Warnock used some of the elections in there, which were, well, everything's quoted from somewhere else, but a lot of the a lot of the astrological terminology that he had in there, like Tyson didn't know what they were,
right,
to begin with. So I think that people just sort of glossed it over.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there kind of the impression that JF didn't even really know what they were?
I suspect JF didn't know.
So when
famous perfection.
Yeah. And then, so when you got into it and you started translating the astrological stuff, like, what did you kind of discover? Like, was there anything mind-blowing or?
Mind-blowing. Well, I think the biggest thing was realizing the extent that he was quoting from other books. I expected more Picatrix references in there, and there weren't as many as I thought. Because I always wondered why the Deccan images were different in Agrippa. And then I found out that it was a mixture of Picatrix and Leopold of Austria, who no one talks about.
Well, who's Leopold of Austria?
He's an Austrian.
Oh, okay.
He wrote a couple of astrology books.
Yeah.
When was he? 15th century?
Okay, so, all right. Did Agrippa even have access to the Picatrix?
I believe he did at one point. I don't think he owned it.
Okay.
This is a guess I have.
Yeah.
Because I think he took notes.
All right. Okay.
And because there's some material, so the mansions, decans, and there's like a random sentence in the middle of book 2, I think.
That's just like straight.
That's about numbers. This is Picatrix. About measuring a corpse twice.
Weird.
That's
Okay.
a random sentence.
But do you think Leopold then had the Picatrix, or like?
I think, possibly. There weren't that many copies
Right.
that I know of.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
but Leopold wasn't quoted either. I mean, he was sort of taking, bits that maybe he read in Picatrix, but he had his own take. Like, the images are different. He had his own images, and so Agrippa was quoting his images.
So does that sort of indicate that there were like two different traditions of like astrological magic that were sort of existing in Europe at the time, or it was just sort of different sets of images?
I think it's basically one tradition, and I don't know why Leopold would have used different ones. Maybe he didn't have a copy of Picatrix.
Yeah, maybe he was just.
That could be a reason. I think maybe he was making his own images. Just maybe he's using his own like mediumship. Maybe I don't know, but his own intuition. And making his own. Who knows?
Well, yeah.
I mean, because we don't really know all who had it. I mean, we know Dee had it. We know that Lily had it. But there's not that many manuscripts.
And Dee and Lily are also later too.
Sorry?
I mean, Dee and Lily are both like 100 years. I mean,
They're later.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it might have been the same copy.
Really?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's what I read somewhere.
Yeah, because the Picatrix never really got published. It was the Latin one was just in manuscript form.
Only manuscript.
God, that's weird.
I think there might have been maybe a dozen copies of it. So I think that people traded notes. I think that people had fragments here and there. Very, very few people actually read it. I mean, Ficino probably did.
Yeah.
Because
it feels weird that the Picatrix didn't develop into more of like an underground kind of like cunning man sort of thing, like like the Key of Solomon did, like Solomonic magic. Like
It was definitely separate, and it was also a lot of David Ibn Qurra's books were
that's right.
translated in Latin as well,
Okay.
which Agrippa also used. And he had his own talismanic book that Agrippa publishes most of it.
Right,
in
right.
three books.
So I guess one of the things that I would be wondering now is, like, now that people are actually reading Agrippa, paying attention to 3 books for the first time, at least en masse, like, do you think more of them are turning to some of the sources that Agrippa was using?
I hope so.
Yeah? Because some of them are still really, really tough to find, like...
Well, they're all easy to get on the internet.
In Latin.
In Latin.
Yeah, or some other language. But, like, there's a translation of De Arte Kabbalistica, but there's not a translation of Reuchelin's other Kabbalah book.
Remember Foucault?
Yeah. I was not going to remember the name, but I knew you would.
I remember. Pepperidge Farm remembers.
So,
also, the other is that, so that's the thing. I know you probably want to talk about it later, but he had the little tiny manuscript, the baby 3 books.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And
The juvenile.
the juvenile edition.
Yeah.
Juvenile. And so the difference between that and what this is mostly because of De Arte Kabbalistica and also Harmonia Mundi by Franciscus Georgi. And that, I mean, he quotes just chapters and chapters and chapters and chapters from it.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a boring book. I've thought about translating that, but I don't think people want to read it.
And it's huge, isn't it?
It's enormous, but it's also it's very much a guy trying to reconcile Plato and Kabbalah and magic into one system with Christianity.
And very early on, too. That couldn't have been easy. I mean, I don't know what kind of scholarship has been done around Harmonia Mundi, but with Reuchlin, like, there's people love writing about, like, which Kabbalistic manuscripts he had access to or what he was writing from and that kind of stuff. But it was tough. It was tough for Christians who weren't Jewish or didn't have any Jewish background to get a hold of any of the authentic Kabbalah stuff. Like,
yeah, and Agrippa would have thought. I mean, he learned it through Reuchlin, but he thought that was just the ancient version.
Yeah.
He had no way of knowing that it was recent.
Yeah, and he had no way of knowing the other developments that were going on simultaneously. Like, that's kind of interesting, how Christian Kabbalah sort of started off so different than what, like, any modern Kabbalah stuff is. Like, there were parts of it that it just totally ignored, or it didn't ignore, it just didn't know.
Yeah, they weren't aware. There were so many holes. The one of the mysteries when I was translating it was that. So he quotes the Art of Kabbalah, extensively, and the Hebrew that he quotes is different than Reuchlin's.
What?
And I didn't. Okay, so part of it I didn't discover until the. I mean, I'm talking like it was in editing. I didn't notice it. Luckily, we caught it. But I had a Jewish editor who reads Hebrew, so it helped out a lot.
Oh man.
Yeah, so so the passages that have Hebrew in it are from Reuchlin, but the Hebrew is different. I mean, completely different passages. I suspect, and then the critical edition had different Hebrew than what Agrippa had. And I was going off the critical edition at first, and I just because I don't know if you've ever seen Hebrew in Renaissance text, but it's kind of hard to look at.
It is.
And so I was not going to go through that. So I used the critical edition, and I was happily going with it.
Yeah.
Sent it off to the editor, and she said, "Where'd you get this from?" I said, "Well, it's from Agrippa." And she said, "Well, can you send me a screenshot?" And I said, "Sure." So I sent her a screenshot. She goes, "It's wrong." And she said, "Do you have a screenshot of the original edition?" So I sent that to her. She goes, "Well, he's right. Agrippa was correct."
So what happened to the critical edition?
I have no idea. But she said the reason why it stuck out is because it was a passage from Exodus that's quoted during Passover.
Okay. And
so she grew up hearing it.
right, and it was wrong.
It was wrong.
That's crazy.
So yeah, I caught that at the very end, and then I remember Tyson said there were errors in the Hebrew, so he tried to correct it. So I didn't even go through Tyson's. I didn't make a comparison, but it sounds like a mess. I mean,
Yeah. So the critical edition of De Occulta, like when was that put together?
91.
Were you? I mean, are the scholars who did it still around? Like, could you?
Oh, maybe I'm not. I don't want to contact her.
Huh? That's really strange. Yeah. I mean, that's the
I also have no legs to stand on with it.
right.
Yes, I'm not great with Hebrew, so.
Right. I mean, all you can do is ask the question,
Yeah.
like, "What's up with this?" Like, maybe. I mean, maybe there's another. I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out. Like, maybe in Agrippa's opera or something. There's. I don't know. I'm just.
She could have used a different edition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't compare every single edition because one of the things that someone online yelled at me about after it was published was apparently there was an edition of opera that JF used that was different than what I was looking at,
Oh, okay.
which may have explained some of the discrepancies.
Hmm.
But he was like, "Well, you didn't pay attention to his manuscript?" And because he goes, "And neither did the woman who did the critical edition." I'm like, "Well, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know about it."
I have to scoot my chair. I feel like I'm at a very uncomfortable angle. I'm not sure what angle you're supposed to be at when we're doing a thing like this. So hopefully I didn't screw anything up.
Have you watched The Tonight Show?
Yeah. Do they move their chairs a lot?
No, they usually just go down until someone falls off.
Oh.
But anyway, my point is that I think that there must have been like all the editions had differences in them,
Yeah.
and she may have just made a choice.
Yeah, and that's kind of a funny thing. I mean, I guess it's hard for us, in the world of computers and computer-based printing and all that kind of stuff to envision how like labor-intensive it is to put together a book of this size and to print something like this. And like movable type, there's workers who have to put together.
Well, I can't even imagine what they went through.
Oh God, but why wouldn't there be differences and why wouldn't there be errors? And I mean, if there's some printing house where nobody speaks Hebrew, like maybe they're just going to pick up a whole block of Hebrew and just smack it right in there and be like, "Good enough." None of our customers are going to know what this says.
What was I going to say? Something about. Yeah, I mean that was part of what took me so long too. Was, a lot of the sources were mentioned in the critical edition, but I didn't just say, "Oh, well, this is what she says," so I'm just gonna.
Yeah. You actually went and found it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
So I did find differences, and there are also a couple that were not in the critical edition I found because of the internet. I was able to find things pretty easily.
Has working with Agrippa impacted your astrology practice?
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole thing about the diamonds, a whole service based on that, and that's directly from Agrippa.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean, it's pretty steeped in my head at this point, so I think, I don't know, I guess if someone nails me down and starts asking me about like how stuff works, I start to channel a little bit of Agrippa. I don't always agree with Agrippa, Agrippa 100%, but
Well, that's good because sometimes he says some pretty crazy stuff.
sometimes he does crazy stuff. But I think that's what's important about the book is not that it's going to give you the answers. It's that you have to start somewhere. And I think so one of my kind of beefs in astrology is that people, is going to jump to, well, it's caused by gravity, or it's caused by magnetism, or it's caused by light, or something like that, or it's quantum physics, or something like that. And no one really has a clear answer, but they have a clear answer, and it's very philosophical, But it kind of fits in. Now that we're starting to learn so much more about the history of astrology. Robert Schmidt from Project Hindsight said something that I've been saying for like 5 years with no proof.
Yeah.
That he believes that astrology was not created through observation and through philosophical constructs. And it sounds sort of counterintuitive.
Can
in
you
a way to say
explain that a little bit more?
Like, it wasn't necessarily created by people watching the sky and saying, okay, Venus is in Scorpio, so this is going on.
Okay.
They'll say, like, it's basically like, it's a numerical and philosophical construct that kind of fits together and it works because it's supposed to work. So you're familiar with the Arabic or the lots or whatever, the Arabic parts. For those who don't know.
Oh yeah.
Some people may not know, but they're points on a chart that are derived through. Basically, you subtract the degree of one thing on the chart from a degree of another thing in the chart, and you take that number and you add it to the ascendant, and there's like a meaning to it. So you have the lot of father. So you do, the sun to Saturn, take that number of degrees, add it to the ascendant, and then it gives you someplace in the chart. That's the father.
Yeah,
And
I think most people know the Lot of Fortune. For
a lot of
instance.
fortune is the most popular.
Yeah.
So in ancient, in Hellenistic astrology, they would, in early Arabic astrology, they would take, the sort of natural rulers, like Venus's love, and then they would take the rulers of a house, maybe a special significant of some kind, and a lot, and they sort of triangulate it together into a meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But the lots can never be derived from observation.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And it works.
Mm-hmm.
It works really well,
Mm-hmm.
and it works because it should work.
So you're kind of thinking that possibly all of astrology was sort of derived that way through like some sort of numerical philosophy instead of.
A mixture of philosophies, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm just talking about Robert Schmidt. I mean, he went through like a 9-hour lecture about this.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't seem to have been, totally been handed over from the Babylonians. I mean, it was started by them,
Mm-hmm.
but the Hellenistic people, because they weren't necessarily Greek,
Mm-hmm.
sort of did their own thing with it and created this whole new construct around that.
Okay. Okay. Wait. So hold on. This came out of some question about Agrippa.
Oh,
nobody.
about the way it affected astrology, maybe?
Yeah. I was just sort of also musing about, like, when you do a live podcast, nobody can see all the times when I stop and I'm like, hold on, what the heck were we talking about? Because I get to edit that.
If it affected the way you do astrology.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah. So I was talking about, like, that I think it's important to, books like this, Ficino's another one, where, kind of get you started on the line of an inquiry, sort of like come up with the answers, because I don't think the answers are going to be light or magnetism or gravity or quantum physics. I think it's something a little bit more spiritual, maybe.
Yeah, and Agrippa actually talks about that when he talks about his sort of like theory of divine light. Like, I mean, he doesn't really have a separation between like light and divine light, like, physical light and divine
Part
light.
of the same substance.
But he also didn't understand light the same way we do now. I mean, the idea of light as corpuscles or photons or whatever is like hundreds of years after Agrippa. Like,
It's also not important for something like this.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, what was I going to say about that? I lost my train of thought.
Well, how about this?
Something very profound.
Something about, like, light can be both a physical thing and a and a spiritual thing.
Yes.
And I mean, when I read Agrippa's description of it, I sort of am like, this should be looked at as more of a spiritual thing. Like, who knows if your eyeballs can even pick it up? Agrippa seems to think that vision is kind of crap anyhow.
Well, he also believed that the Greeks believed that we projected our sight.
Yeah.
So the light didn't come to us; we came to the light.
Yeah, which is a little weird.
We think about that. That's a great explanation for the evil eye, though.
It is.
So.
It doesn't explain this giant light that's shining on us right now, though. Like, the eye of
No, it doesn't
Sauron
explain
over
that.
But out of Agrippa, like, I remember when you had first translated it and you were first talking about it, there were certain concepts that Agrippa had discussed, like the perfection one, where where it had been in a mistranslated or you know, like corrupt form in English for, 400 years. Did any of those, when you figured out the correct translation of them, did any of those sort of change the way you looked at things, or were most of those concepts already present in other astrological sources?
I was aware of the concepts, but when I read it in Agrippa, I'm like, well, of course that's what he's talking about. Because you read the JF version, and it's just not clear what he's talking about. And the Tyson then obfuscated it more with some of the footnotes.
Right.
So I really don't blame him for this because the information wasn't available really back then. I mean, he did, I think, well, I might have this backwards. No, he came out in 93, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
So, the state of traditional astrology back then was pretty bad. I mean, there wasn't much there.
Yeah, I mean, that whole resurgence of traditional astrology didn't start until the 2000s, right? Like
it started before that, but it wasn't very. I mean, Project Hindsight started in '92, I think.
Okay.
But he would have not been. There's no way he would have been aware of it. And they barely had any books yet published. Right. I mean, there were like these secret little pockets. So you had Robert Zoller was working on Bonatti in the 80s. In England, there was the whole resurgence with William Lilly, and that started in the late 80s.
Okay. I think also, though, at the time, there was a little bit of a rift between ceremonial magic practitioners and astrology.
That still exists.
It does, but but there's still more of a there's more of a bleed over now. Like you see more sort of like traditional magicians saying like, oh, I'm going to learn, like me, like I know enough astrology to do an election, but I don't know what the heck, I can't read a chart, really.
No, back then it went both ways.
Yeah.
Mostly, a lot of astrologers didn't want to have anything to do with magic. And then the magicians didn't want to know about astrology. It was too woo-woo for them.
Yeah. Both of them were probably thinking the other side was too woo-woo.
Yes. Yeah.
And they were both right.
I'm getting these arguments. I remember back in MySpace, I remember getting into arguments with people. Like, why would you want to do magic? You're just going to, defile yourself in a magic circle and like, no.
How many rabbits do you actually need?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So those were concepts that were already out there. It was just sort of confused. There was no real clear idea of what Agrippa was even talking about. And most people weren't reading
the translation.
Yeah.
So the profession one, that example is really a good one because JF translated it as perfection, and consistently throughout the book.
Okay.
And so then Tyson said, "Oh, it's the newer full moon." And so then when he talks about the ninth sign of profession, then Tyson's like, "Okay, well, it's the ninth sign from the full moon."
Why not? When you were translating book one, when you were in the first third of your project, and you were coming across all that great stuff from Pliny the Elder from natural history, like the fish that can stop ships.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking of that one.
I mean, it's the best example. It's the most ridiculous one. Like, you'd think that someone would have said something.
Well, my favorite, though, the word that I learned was onocenter.
Onocenter.
Which is a half man, half donkey.
Oh, weird. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it checks out in the OED, too.
Huh. But were you sort of, did you find that any of those passages sort of like particularly baffling? Like how would this possibly have made it in here? Like I think almost every chapter has something kind of baffling about from natural history. And I then discovered that you can just pick up, natural history, a little bit of background on it. It's the largest complete book that we have from ancient Rome. And it's like 6 enormous books. It was scrolls back then. It's like 36 scrolls.
Yeah.
It's enormous. And it's just a catalog of everything that Pliny the Elder thought we knew. And he apparently he went around and interviewed people and got testimony from people and just made this enormous catalog. And it is, you just pick up any book at random, and it's just, you will read something crazy.
No, but he also quotes Horapollo, who's equally crazy. Do you know Horapollo?
No, I don't know Horapollo.
So that, so he was. When was he around? Like, extremely late classical.
Okay, well, Pliny the Elder died in Vesuvius. That
Correct.
was 70.
Right.
The year 70. So Horapollo would have been before then.
No, he's way after.
After.
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying Agrippa quotes Horapollo.
Yeah.
Oh.
Horapollo's the other one.
Okay, I don't think I know Horapollo at all.
Yeah, you can find it for free on the internet. But the book is about it's his interpretation of the hieroglyphics.
Uh-huh.
But it's all kind of like, oh, there's a picture of a baboon. Well, they say that whenever they want to talk about the sun, they just they draw a picture of a baboon because baboons naturally, and they go through this whole thing. And that one I remember was like they said because baboons, when it becomes noon, they bark at the sun and then urinate.
I do that same thing.
I do the same thing too. And then you would be immortalized on a inscription. The great urinator, noontime urinator.
Yeah. Great. How do you say that in Latin?
I don't want to know.
You know what? But it's funny that tradition of like just making up whatever the hell you thought the hieroglyphs meant. It went on until we actually translated them for real.
Yeah.
Athanasius Kircher, another famous Christian Kabbalist who was like 100 so years after Agrippa, he did the same thing. He thought he was right about all his hieroglyphs, and
if you can think it, it's good.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I understood. I think I understood why he was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's several reasons why, because there was no, I don't know. I mean, I guess the appeal to antiquity was sort of like the main thing.
Yeah.
Back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's old, it's got to be true.
Yeah, and that was just what everybody believed.
That's what everybody did.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm looking at that too, and I'm like, okay, well, I think that's kind of an example of maybe magical contagion. I think it's in a chapter even.
Yeah.
Where it talks about like, magic transferring from through touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, point taken.
Mm-hmm.
Goofy example, but point taken. I don't know. I think that's how I kind of read it was, okay, what is he trying to tell us versus what is this goofy ass thing he's talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the first time I kind of had that sort of feeling out of book one was when he writes about fascination.
Yeah.
And he describes fascination as happening when somebody like sprays a fine mist of blood out of their eyeballs.
Yes.
And it sounds insane, but when you read what he's talking about, when you read about how he's talking about sort of like images being transferred that way and all this other kind of stuff, it really just made me feel like, maybe that wasn't exactly what he meant. And I think that even people who were reading him a little while later, like I think Giordano.
This is a blood. I seem to remember.
A blood?
A blood.
Just one?
Yeah, but meaning like a kind of.
Oh.
Like
maybe that's what it.
Like if you're going to call it something. It's a blood.
Okay, so it
It
might not.
It was a tough passage.
Yeah.
To translate.
So it might not even be a liquid.
No, I think it was a vapor.
A vapor.
If I remember the passage correctly.
Okay.
I spent like an hour on that sentence.
Well.
Still
I'm looking at it and I'm like,
well, it's right here.
Yeah.
Because JF didn't translate it very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to change that around quite a bit.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense either. But I think he was talking about being a type of a vapor coming out of your eye.
Yeah. It sort of reminded me of something that I had read in one of those old monastic pieces about images, where there was this thought that like when someone entrances you, it's because a very tiny image of them is embedded in your eyeball and it makes its way into your soul and stuff. And I was kind of like, is this what he's talking about?
When I affected mini-me.
Yeah.
I think that might have come from Pacino, if I remember correct, too.
Really? Okay.
Maybe
Well, I
Platonic
mean,
theology.
Ficino would have had access to monastic stuff too. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows?
No, I meant that passage we're talking
that
about.
passage? Okay. Huh.
If I remember correctly.
And so that would have been in like 3 books of life.
I think it's Platonic theology.
Platonic theology.
He quotes that quite a bit.
Okay.
That's actually the little hidden treasure if no one's read it. It's a great
Yeah.
book.
Okay. By Ficino.
By
Is
Ficino.
there an English translation
Yeah.
available? Oh, there is.
Yeah, it's sort of like those Leb editions with the facing Latin and English.
Oh, okay.
It's not from them, but it's the same style.
Okay.
I think
Cool.
it's by Cambridge or someplace.
All right.
Or Harvard.
Well, I hope everybody's writing that down.
Platonic theology.
By Ficino.
Ficino's not paying me for this endorsement. No, Ficino is just like, it's just comforting to read, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read a lot of his letters. I haven't even read three books on life yet. I'm a very bad occultist.
Yeah, you're pretty bad.
Yeah.
Shame. Where's my shame bell?
Have you seen Agrippa sort of like making changes, or your translation, or the availability of this new translation? Like, what changes have you seen it starting to make in the world of astrology or magic? Like, are people? I mean, I know you get interviewed a lot about it.
Yes. Most of them haven't read it. If you have.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, it's a lot to read, though. I've gotten some feedback from astrologers mostly,
Really interesting.
particularly the younger crowd, because they're. I don't know. I think it's because it's this new edition that's out, and it's a lot more accessible, you know. And so I don't know why them necessarily, but I've had feedback from several that have even called like a couple of typos, which I won't mention. So they're actually really reading it.
Yeah.
I kind of like that criticism a little bit.
The typo thing.
Because you're reading it, then I can tell you're reading it.
Did you follow along with Justin Sledge's recent?
I didn't finish
Agrippa?
it.
Yeah, I haven't finished it either
I've
yet.
watched 4 of them.
But the thing, so I was watching it while it was live. While it
He
was.
mentioned you, yeah.
Oh, that's true. He did. Yes. I did. I like Agrippa. But the thing that was fascinating was the crowd he was drawing. Like,
Yeah.
just tons and tons of people were taking the class, and there's a Discord server that one of them started up and people are actually reading Agrippa, and a lot of them aren't occultists or astrologers, and they're just sort of like, interested in history or interested in that
History
kind of
of
stuff.
science or whatever.
Yeah. Science.
It is.
I mean,
science.
it is science. I mean, that's the thing that's so funny. Like, he would have loved living 100 years later, except for the war.
Sure.
The 30 Years War probably would have annoyed him, but the other part of it, he would have loved.
The non-30 years portion of
Yeah.
100 years later.
But I mean, he's he died 50 years before Francis Bacon.
Yeah.
70 years before Kepler and Brahe and Galileo and stuff. Like, he would have loved all of that stuff.
Yeah, I kind of also. I kind of wonder what you would think after the Enlightenment, scientific Enlightenment,
Yeah.
because he was leaning into that.
Especially I haven't finished Dr. Sledge's course yet either, but the fact that as he got on in life, he sort of took a more rational, or I don't want to say empirical, but non-magical view of things, and kind of in some way sort of repudiated some of his earlier beliefs. That's kind of a really interesting.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that easy. And but he was always anti-authority.
Yeah.
The whole retraction. Because I get asked that a lot about the retraction, and I know it's I don't think it's as easy to say okay, well, he used to believe in the occult and then he stopped. It's that I think he always believed in it because it's just part of the fabric of what the beliefs in general were.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it.
And his retraction is from his the Uncertainty of the Sciences book. Has that been translated? I think it's been translated.
Justin just published a translation
of that one.
Yeah, Dana Trell and Justin Sledge I think it's in there.
I just couldn't remember that because that's a whole big book. I know they published some other stuff.
Yeah, maybe it's not in there. I don't know if there's a translation of that.
Okay, I didn't think that was part of it, but maybe I'm wrong.
There's it's not the same as on the Vanities book, is it?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh,
Vanity
then
Sciences.
I think there is a translation of that.
Okay.
Or part of it, at least.
But basically, the tone of the book is sort of like a little bit of a satire. And he was criticizing that. Basically, he was making fun of people who just think they understand everything, and also as a poke at authority. So he basically just went through all the areas of human knowledge and just kind of just poked at it.
Right. Okay.
Systematically. And at the end of the JF edition, there's that little section that has on Goetia, on necromancy, those little tiny things. That's all from that book.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. Now I have to ask you another question, an old question. Have you looked at the Latin for the fourth book at all?
Yes.
And what do you think? Is the section on ceremonies at the beginning, the one where he talks about like the Liber Spirituum and stuff, is it in Agrippa's styles?
I don't think so.
You don't?
The student didn't think so.
Okay.
And one thing I didn't realize until, because when I was interviewed by Justin Sledge, before we recorded, or went live, I can't remember if it was live, before we started, he showed me, like, on the camera, he showed me the Opera Omnia in like, the actual bound version.
Oh, yeah,
actually
it's
saw
that
it first.
huge one that he's got.
And the thing he pointed out was, he goes, okay, look, here's book 1, it's like this thick. And then he showed me book 2, and it's this thick, but Agrippa's this much. And he was like, yeah, this is what they used to do. Which this part I did know. That they used to fatten up books with other texts.
Yeah.
And so I think, and one of the things that sort of made me lose confidence in it, because I was considering translating it, was I went to the original Latin, and when I looked at Turner's edition, I thought, okay, there would be this like chunk this big in the Opera Omnia that would be the fourth book of Occult Philosophy. And it's not like that. So there's a little section there that has the on ceremonies, like you said, the geomancy thing, and then the Abano, the Heptameron's in there,
the Isagoge,
and then all the rest of that stuff is just like all like scattered around. So he was obviously just picking things that he liked.
So Turner was sort of cherry picking it. So okay, interesting.
And not that it invalidates it, but I was just like, I just don't want to mess with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess I'm curious about it because I haven't really spent any time with Agrippa's Latin, but I went and was looking at some of the Latin on ceremonies when I was working with part of it, and I was kind of, I thought it felt really choppy, but
it also doesn't feel like something he would have written.
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel like he would want to write something called the fourth book. Because the layout of the three books is just so like, it makes so much sense. You have the earth, and you have the sky, then you have the heavens, and it's just a natural sort of way to divide it, everything up, and everything just refers to those three parts. And then
what are you going to do with the fourth book? Yeah, where do you go next?
I mean, it's like getting the 13th sign.
It's like making a prequel trilogy for Star Wars.
Nerd.
Well, I think let's take some questions from the audience. Audience, do you have any questions? Oh, we have a question from the internet.
No.
Oh.
I have a question for me.
Oh.
So are you still planning on maybe publishing the translation of the Pictrix at some point?
No, because there's a good Latin translation, or translation of the Latin, and the Arabic, the English from Arabic is coming out any minute. We've been waiting for a while. It's an academic volume, so it has to kind of go through its, and her everything I've seen her write is amazing, and so I expect it's going to be really great. I've been doing private for my own research purposes, work with it, but
Ooh. Secret
I can't
Picatrix.
publish it because it wouldn't be very ethical to be like, oh, you're going to use a translator for this.
Are there any questions from the internet chat?
Not that I've seen so far.
All right. Any of you have any questions? All right. I'm going to have to make up some more.
Agrippa's dog.
Oh my God! Let's talk about Agrippa's dog. I mean, that is kind of a good story.
It is.
So Agrippa died in 1535,
Right.
And his student John
Wire.
Was his student the one that spread the story about the dog, or was he sort of like?
No, he was the debunker.
Oh, so everybody else had the story about
Yes.
Agrippa's magic dog.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear about Agrippa's magic dog.
So, yeah, the story was that, so he had this fearsome black hellhound, and it supposedly would travel abroad and then bring back Agrippa like news from the world and about different people, and because Agrippa was just too damn powerful, and anyway, but then eventually Agrippa came to his senses, and he was like, something. He said something to the effect of, what have you done to me, or what have you made me do? And he goes, go away. And so the dog then leaped through the window, or left the house, and then immediately jumped into a stream and drowned. It's very anticlimactic, I guess.
I thought, wasn't there something about the dog showing up after Agrippa's death?
I
Also?
don't remember that part of it.
Okay. Maybe I might be misremembering something, but I thought.
Anyway, but his student said, okay, well, the dog's name was Monsieur. And Agrippa was just really devoted. He loved his dog.
Well,
And he would he said that he would take food from his plate and feed it to the dog. Mm-hmm. And he just really doted on it.
So Agrippa was a dog person.
He was. Yeah.
Are there any historical magicians that you think might have been cat people? I'm kind of picturing John Dee as a cat person.
Yeah, that was the first that came to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well.
Yeah, a little polyamorous cat person.
Yeah. When your apprentice comes to you, he's like, "We have to trade cats." You're like, "Why?"
You got the little kitty cule.
All right. Well,
all the secret dirt comes from us,
yeah. Someday there'll be people talking about that. Did you ever hear the thing about John Dee's cat?
This is how history starts.
Right. So since you're not going to be working on the Picatrix or Harmonia Mundi, do you have another translation project?
Yeah, I have a few. I'm working on. I don't know if I should tell stuff.
You don't have to say.
Maybe I shouldn't say.
Give us a century. Just tell us.
I'm working on a short astrology book that has been translated badly.
Okay.
I'm working on another astrology book that has never been fully translated. That's taking me forever
Yeah.
to do. And in fact, I keep getting discouraged. It's like physically a huge book. So it's kind of daunting. It's bigger than this.
So maybe just 12 years.
I don't know why I do that. That's all. Yeah. So basically, it's hard to think of books to translate.
Yeah. I can see that being I mean, you have to find something that people are actually curious about.
Right.
And then something that hasn't already been done.
Or is worth doing again.
And it has to be something that you're interested in. Otherwise, how the heck are you going to get through it?
Yeah, there's a couple little ones I'm thinking of here and there, but I want to get through these two.
All right, well, that's
Possibly
cool.
a book on astrological magic.
And you do, but you are a professional astrologer doing professional astrology stuff. And
I do readings.
yeah, you should tell the camera your website.
My website is ericpurdue.com.
That's with a C.
It's with a C, and it's Purdue, spelled like university, not the chickens. And yeah, so I do natal readings, and I also do one called a spiritual reading, which kind of obviously goes into more spiritual matters, and I could talk about your daemons, the daemons.
Do you calculate them?
Yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, I do. I'd make a sigil for them too. And,
Oh, really? Using one of Agrippa's methods? Nice. Which one?
well, the basic method. I mean, like everybody uses.
I don't know what everybody's using.
Oh, just imagine a square and you connect the dots.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. I guess that makes sense.
Um,
He has some easier methods in one of his chapters where he's like, just
Well-
stack the letters on top of each other.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to like internalize the planetary ones that he does, because some of them are like Saturn is literally just connecting the dots, like
Yeah.
without even the name. You're literally just going 1, 2, 3, 4 like that.
Does he have? Okay.
Yeah, it's literally what it is. But then when you get to like what is it, like Mercury and all those, it starts to get a little bit stranger.
Yeah. I don't know
I
that
haven't quite internalized it yet. I it's like one of those things that I almost see it, and I've read some things about it, and it makes sense when I read it and I look at it. I'm like, okay, I just need to reproduce this, and I have a hard time,
Yeah. I mean, it's like all of the times that he talks about math or any sort of puzzle thing, you just have to. I don't know if you ever know if you're going to do it right either.
No.
Yeah.
He's doing some sort of exchange thing with the way the positions of the letter or the numbers.
Oh, that's
some of
right.
them.
Yeah. Yeah, I just tend to, when I use the magic squares, I just keep it really simple. I just, translate the letters into numbers and operate over a finite field.
And the one thing I have to, and then he also says that when you have the name, you have to add a suffix that denotes, divinity, which is either Ya or L.
L. Yeah.
I just use L for all of them because I don't know why you use one versus the other.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be very clear on that. I always use L also, but
I think everybody does.
yeah.
But I had a theory for a little while that maybe Ya was feminine. But then some Hebrew speakers were like, no, they're both.
Yeah.
Actually, both kind of masculine, both kind of both.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I guess. I mean, that's cool. That's a good service.
Yeah, because I thought that I thought I had something kind of like unlocked, and so I'm like, okay, great. If the ruler of their good daimon is like Venus, then I can use like a feminine suffix, something like that. But it didn't work out.
The tables that he has in like in the name calculating tables where it talks about like the entrance of good demons and bad demons.
Oh yeah.
Have you been able to figure those
no.
out?
That's another mystery I have.
I've been working with those and trying to
Yeah.
get them to mean anything, and I've gotten like nowhere.
I think the other ones are something that a lot of like knowledgeable Kabbalists can do. It feels like that to me, and I'm not one of those people.
Yeah, and it's possible. I don't know.
It feels that way to me, and I spoke to a rabbi once, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this makes sense to me. Let's talk later," and then we never did. So I feel like that's there, but that one I don't understand at all.
Yeah, I look at it for a few days every couple of months and hope that it'll make sense. And
And you know it's simple.
I know it's gonna.
It always is.
I know it's gonna be really, really simple. Like all of his methods always end up being simple and just overly complicatedly explained. Like I don't know. They hadn't invented mathematical notation yet. They
definitely did.
They had some of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
They definitely did. Yeah. Yeah, because knowing traditional astrology though, when I was reading some of those sections, it definitely clicked a little bit differently. Like when he was talking about, actually about the names, because he talks about finding like a ruler over many places, and I looked at him, I could go, that's straight from Bonatti or Ibn Ezra. Not the quote, but the technique.
Okay.
Which are called Amatens.
Right, and that's something that astrologers have been sort of like continuing to use and work on, so people kind of
Yeah, it's just not very popular right now.
Yeah. Okay.
But during the Renaissance, it was popular.
Okay.
For sure. I want to bring that back 'cause I actually really like it.
Yeah.
It's a nice, because they have a technique for finding the altitude of the chart, and I like it because because a lot of people concentrate on their like sun or sun, you have the sun sign ruler or ruler of their ascendant or something like that. And this one will give you sometimes like something totally different. It's supposed to be the most influential planet in your chart. So I like it because it's like, okay, well, my rising sign is Sagittarius and ruled by Jupiter, but then my almatin is Mars. Okay, what's that about? So it kind of gives you this other planet to look at.
Is there a quick way to calculate almatin, or does it take a while?
It takes me about 5 minutes
Okay.
to do it.
Cool.
There's one astrology program that does it correctly. It's 8 o'clock.
Oh no. Well, that's probably a good sign. I feel like this has been good. I have questions. I have more questions about stuff like, so there are a lot of practices in Agrippa that have kind of like fallen by the wayside. So, for instance, there's the frenzies. There's augury. He has a chapter on augury.
The bird omens.
Yeah. I mean, and he takes that straight from an old Latin text. I don't know if he
Michael
quote.
Scott.
Is that what it's from? And I think even in the book, he might mention it's Michael Scott who's quoting like some older person too.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but that was the worst chapter.
Yeah.
It was easy to translate, but holy God, trying to like tabulate this.
Oh, I've been trying to do that too. I've been trying to figure out if it could be.
There's stuff missing in it.
Oh, that makes
But
sense.
it's not Agrippa. It's the source. And my editor actually sent me a comment back. She was like, "Can you put this together and just make sure that actually this is correct?" Because there was like things missing and there were discrepancies.
Okay.
Because he has this little thing at the beginning where it says, on the left side you have blah 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 blah. He gives these names out. And on the right side you have blah 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 blah. And then you actually see the listing and they're different.
Yeah.
And I think there's one missing.
Yeah. I think. Yeah.
And,
I think I listed that out.
And then a couple of them, the names are just different. And so the editor was like, okay, I want to make sure if this isn't you or Agrippa or something else. And then there was this comment that said, I'm pretty sure this is my least favorite chapter. I made a table for it.
I've made a table myself to try to figure it out, and there's missing parts.
Yeah.
And then the frenzies are really interesting because near the end of book 3, he goes into like these descriptions of these like 4 different types of frenzy and he ascribes each of them to an ancient Greek or Roman god. And
there's like the Muses, wasn't there?
I think the Muses is one of them. There's like a frenzy of Venus and a frenzy
Apollo.
of Apollo. And he describes like what each of them is for. But most of them, he doesn't give a description of how these frenzies are, entered into or what constitutes them. And then in one of them, I think he actually says like, I have no idea how you do this.
I assume they're just like ecstatic states, like not.
Yeah, except that they're somehow like really distinct,
I mean, from being in an ATR, that does have. I mean, you can tell.
Right.
I mean, they're different. That's actually part of like the experience is that if someone is possessed, you're supposed to be able to tell like, is this an Orisha? Is this just some random ass spirit? Or something like that.
Okay.
There's ways they can tell.
So
I kind of wonder if it's something like that where there's like a character that happens.
Yeah, and maybe it's just sort of been lost in translation over generations.
Yeah, there are definitely mysteries like that, and I mean it's also really frustrating when Pliny, it's in here, but when Pliny says there's a stone that you obtain to like to summon the gods.
Yeah.
And I want that stone.
Me too.
It's probably something stupid. It's like, it's
I'm kind of curious about the Trithemius' magic mirror that he can use to communicate over vast distances.
Oh yeah, the vast distances. Yeah.
I think Agrippa mentions it twice, and he's like, "I've seen Trithemius do this."
No, he actually said it. Yeah, he said, "I've seen this." Yeah, that's one of the examples where he says that he did it.
Yeah,
I saw it.
Yeah, and then he doesn't tell you how.
He also mentioned about the lead and the gold.
Yeah.
In there.
Uh-huh.
He said that I've seen this done, but the results took so much work and required so much material that the result wasn't worth it.
Oh, wow.
Well, so now do you have any questions? All right. No questions?
Oh, you're just waving at us.
Okay.
Hi.
All right. Well, so you told everybody where to find your website and stuff.
Yes.
If you're watching this, you're already watching my YouTube channel or listening to my podcast or however you're consuming that. So thanks. And thanks to Dark Star Magic for hosting us. This is cool. This is a perfect space.
You did such a good job asking questions that no one else has any.
You know, I'm sure I could come up with some more questions. What do you think was Agrippa's favorite color?
Wait, what was Ficino's? Green. Yeah.
Green? Okay.
That was Ficino's, yeah.
Do you think, okay, so if we look at sort of like the timeline of like Agrippa and Trithemius and Paracelsus, like they probably were all never in the same spot at the same time.
They're a Venn diagram.
Yeah, they're a Venn diagram. Do you think that Paracelsus kind of like fanboyed over Agrippa at all, or?
I don't know, and I feel like I'm sort of on the fence because I almost. So Agrippa was pretty well known.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also things traveled really slowly back then.
True.
So it makes me wonder.
If you had a chance to sit down and have dinner with Agrippa, which restaurant would you take him to? Or what kind of cuisine do you think he would enjoy the most?
Oh my God! Well, you know what? He might like sushi. Oh, I'm going to blow your mind, Agrippa.
That's a good one. I wouldn't have thought of that. Oh, you have a question?
What would you ask him at dinner?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I would definitely. We kind of went over it. I would definitely ask about those tables, and also the frenzies, because I've always wondered about that. And I would like to talk to him about the group he was in.
The Agrippian Circle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they called it that.
Yeah, probably not. But yeah, I mean, we don't even know who all the people were in the group. Or
Somebody figured out some. Who was that?
Frater
Was it Frater Acher?
Acher. He has a list, but
Yeah.
a lot of the people in the list are people that we don't have any other record of. So
Yeah.
So lots
It
of
is somewhat
mysterious.
speculative, but yeah. So I think it's interesting, but I'm not sure if it's overblown.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, if you think about how difficult it would have been to get books and stuff, like that might have been where he got some of his sources.
I
and
absolutely
resources
believe
and
that.
Stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that they were trading notes,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes me wonder if that's where he got Picatrix from.
Oh yeah, that would make
That's
sense.
sort of my personal, unprovable theory.
Unless Trithemius had a Picatrix, that'd be cool.
It's possible,
But you'd think it would have shown up.
yeah, I'd like to know more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of what they. I have a feeling it wasn't like a magical. Like people want to think about it's like this group of magicians meeting and doing things. I have a feeling it was just a bunch of nerds like talking about books.
I think so too. I mean, I think that we forget that like it's important to sort of keep in mind like the sort of worldview and mindset that they would have had. Like they were probably nerds trying to figure out how everything worked, and it was just everybody knew that everything worked via occult forces that tugged the universe in one way or the other. That
Well, that's my point about like a lot of people when they like hero worship. Hero worship is a strong word, but like when people kind of like argue, I should say it this way: people kind of argue back and forth in occult and astrology circles today about who's right, or they hold on to this one person's words. And I'm like, okay, at the end of the day, we're a bunch of nerds reading the same ass books. It's like, and it's not only are we reading the same books, but reading the same books that pretty much Agrippa, not really Agrippa because he read a lot more than we do.
yeah.
But, you know, conceptually speaking, you know, we're all kind of doing the same thing. And they're all grasping at straws too.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Dee was grasping at straws. Crowley was grasping at straws. We're all grasping at straws, and we don't know what we're doing.
We spend a lot of time grasping at the straws that previous generations
Exactly.
might have managed to hold on to.
And some of them were bent.
Yeah. So Those poor cats. All right. Well, I think that
Caticule.
I think that's good. I think we could wrap it up. Nick, do you want to click on the button? Let's see if it works.
Does the button stop it?
Did you do the wrong button?
I did the wrong button. Which button do you want me to click on?
You have to click on the thank you scene and then the transition scene button. Cool. All right.
Cool.
Thanks.
We survived.